Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jessica Leclerc. I'm the Executive Director for Sustainable CT, and I am so pleased that we at Sustainable CT can be a part of Connecticut's inaugural Sustainability and Resiliency Week. Today, we're going to be listening in from three amazing municipal leaders who have done some significant work to reduce their community's greenhouse gas emissions and build their community's resilience to climate change. We also are joined by a special guest, Governor Ned Lamont. Before we dig in, I'd like to just give a quick overview of Sustainable CT, in case anyone is new to our program. We are a statewide municipal certification program with a goal to help Connecticut cities and towns advance their overall sustainability. And we look very broadly at sustainability. So we are thinking about access to clean air, clean land, and water, but also the strength of the local economy, access to transportation, affordable housing, the strength of the arts and culture segment of a town, really everything that makes a community whole. At the core of our program, we have a menu of actions that communities can pick from. They can work on actions that speak to themselves of who they are now and who they want to be in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years. They complete those actions, they earn points, and they can use those points towards certification in our program. We have many different resources available to help cities and towns navigate the sustainable CT actions, including technical assistance and funding. And we are a recognition program, so we certify towns. We'll actually be certifying our 2024 cohort of certified towns this November at the Kate in Old Saybrook. We hope you can join us. We'll pop a link in the chat if you are interested in coming to learn more about the work that these communities are doing and to meet face-to-face with the Sustainable CT Network. So I mentioned our program is made up of actions. The actions are very broad, and that really encompasses our broad definition of sustainability. The actions themselves fall within these 13 different action areas. And you can see, again, we're looking very broadly at sustainability. So we're thinking about equity, we're thinking about cultural ecosystems, we're thinking about housing and materials management and energy infrastructure and operations. Truly everything that makes a community whole, that makes a community a place where an individual can thrive and be resilient. We are a certification program. We've got 3 levels of certification, bronze, silver, and gold. And I won't get into the requirements of what is needed to do to achieve any one of these levels, but I do want to let you know that the program is rigorous. So when a town gets certified, they have gone through a pretty substantial process of documenting the work, showcasing, in all the areas in which they are a sustainable community. Of note for our discussion this morning, we have a Climate Leader Designation. This is an optional add-on to certification for our bronze and silver communities, and it is required for those communities that are seeking gold certification. The Climate Leader Designation itself is really a list of high-impact actions that can help a community reduce their greenhouse gas emissions and build their resilience to climate change impacts. There's flexibility. A municipality can look through this list of high-impact actions and pick what actions resonate with them as a community, earn a certain number of points, and then they're a climate leader. Right now, we have 11 communities that have achieved this designation, and we're hearing from 3 climate leading towns this morning. We have different supports available to towns who'd like to move through the Sustainable CT framework. We have equity coaches that can work with your city or town at no cost. They can provide direct support to you as you're navigating different issues with regard to making a community a place that really speaks to all, that creates a sense of belonging for all. We have workshops and trainings throughout the year. They're always no cost. We might dig in on a particular action area, or we might be lifting up and celebrating towns who are leading the way, as we're doing this morning. It's a great way to look under the hood of how a town has approached a particular action and learn with them. We work with many different technical assistance partners from across the state, including state agencies, to provide direct support to towns to help complete actions. Often this comes in the form of essentially free consulting support to complete the activities on a town's list. We also have a fellowship program. Every summer we hire 11 or 12 undergrad and graduate students who are based regionally at the councils of government's offices, again, to provide that direct hands-on support to registered towns within the region as they are working towards their certification. We've had about 100 students over the past several years, and they are amazing resources for communities who are moving through the Sustainable CT framework. Many fellows have gone on to work for towns. They're working at councils of governments. They're working for Sustainable CT partner organizations. They're just a really great asset. New this year, we are also offering a Sustainable Communities Fellowship. This is a little different. It's a year-long fellowship position. We'll have one position in partnership with the Connecticut Green Bank. We are in the process of hiring, so applications are due on October 4th. Please share widely within your network if you know any postgrad students who are interested in pursuing work in the sustainability arena. Another support that we offer to towns is our Community Match Fund. This is a fast, flexible funding program available to anyone in a registered town. Whether you're the town, you work for a nonprofit in the town, or you're a resident who has a really great idea for your neighborhood. If you've got a great idea that aligns directly or indirectly with one of our 77 actions that are very broad, we want to fund it. We want to fund it, and it's a one-to-one match where we'll match up to $7,500 for a project, but we'll match up to $15,000 for a project if it has a climate benefit. And we have seen so many projects go up across Connecticut. You can participate in the Community Match Fund anytime. You have an idea, give us a call after this webinar. We'd love to talk to you and figure out how we can work together and make that project come to life. It's a one-to-one match, so half is from us, half would be from small dollar donors in your community, giving $5, $15, $20 to see that community garden come to life, to see that mural get painted, to participate in that event. We're actually 5 this year, so 5 years. We launched the Community Match Fund in September of 2019. Since then, over $4 million has been invested across the state to support almost 350 projects. And again, you can go out and spend a day driving around visiting all the different projects in Connecticut. It's really inspiring, and it's open to anyone. I can't stress that enough, anyone within a registered community. And one last slide for me before we turn it over to the governor. I just wanted to show you the impact of Sustainable CT, the reach. Right now, we have 138 towns who have passed formal resolutions to participate in Sustainable CT. It's about 82% of the state. 63 towns are certified. 11 have achieved our Climate Leader Designation currently. And certification will last the community 3 years. Our certified towns over time have completed more than 4,000 sustainability actions. So it's just a tremendous amount of inspiring and remarkable work that's happening out across the state. And again, more than $4 million has been invested in community-led projects. So I can't thank all of you enough for being a part of the Sustainable CT Network, for the towns that really take the program and run with it. You are making this program come alive, and we really appreciate it. But now I'm going to stop the share, if I can do this quickly, because we're joined by a very special guest, Governor Ned Lamont. We are so excited to have you, Governor. You've made climate change really a priority of your administration, and we're so excited to hear from you this morning. So with no further ado, Governor, I turn the floor over to you.
Hey, Jessica. Hey, beautifully said. Sustainable CT, more important than ever. Perfectly timely week, I think, to be having this event. I'll just talk about so much as you can make such a difference at the municipal level. And I think that's what you're showcasing today. I love the fact that Buckley Elementary School is the first zero carbon school in New England, I see. That's pretty good. Let's keep going there. We've got a policy that we're working with Katie Dykes and our team at DEEP, where we put in solar in all the renovations of our schools right now, making them all sustainable, getting them off the grid, saving them money, and protecting the grid. And every kilowatt you don't use is the cleanest, most affordable energy you've got out there. I see a lot of the grants and support you have for the municipalities. I hope you're coordinating a lot of that with what Katie's got with the Climate Resilience Fund going out of DEEP. That's to help towns and municipalities apply for the significant federal resources out there when it comes to sustainability and resilience, so we can leverage that money 6 to 1. And the state will be in there alongside of you, being able to make a difference. I kind of like the town's taking the lead. I've seen some extraordinary ones. I love the rain garden in Hamden, and I think in Meriden. I love what Mike Pastro did. He's got that stormwater authority up in New London, where they've taken a parking lot, turned it into a park. And under that park, you've got drainage pipes to send all potential flooding out into the Thames River. That Bank Street used to flood as regular as the sparrows to Capasuano. And that's not going to happen thanks to some of the sustainability we've done. And I just got to tell you, Jessica, people say, boy, dealing with climate change is expensive. How about not dealing with it? I think we're seeing how incredibly expensive that is. Going down to the Naugatuck Valley, visit Oxford, visit Seymour, see what happened there with that rain bomb. They got 18 inches of rain in about 3 hours. Just extraordinary flooding. Nobody there, even has flood insurance. We're doing everything we can as a state to step in and help them, but more importantly, help them build back better so that we can make sure that if these rain bombs become more frequent, we're better prepared to handle them. And there again, DEEP goes down. They help municipalities, they help homeowners see what we can do to rebuild that culvert and drainage or rain garden, ways that we can mitigate the incredible effects of climate change on our greater communities. And I'll tell you, that was extraordinary what happened down there. You see, the little river became the big river in less than 12 hours, and pieces of concrete and cars getting rushed down these rivers, taking out bridges. And now you still have, several bridges and a lot of detours and all the change and work we've got to do. And I got to tell you, before I did this current gig, I was on the board of Conservation Services Group, a real leader when it comes to energy efficiency. We've got a company here in the state called Butterfly. I love what they're doing. They go to businesses and they say, look, let us put in heat pumps, insulation, solar, everything we can to reduce your electricity prices, and we'll share the savings with you. And we'll do it all on our nickel, meaning Butterfly. And they've got about 7,000 companies they've done that for across the country. And working with our friends at DEEP and Katie Dykes, we're trying to get the same model for residential as well, where we have a third-party provider that can get the heat pump grants and the solar grants and all the other discounts the feds have put together, package that in a way that at no upfront cost to you, the homeowner, we can make your home a lot more efficient. And where you get some of the savings, we get paid back by savings as well over time. I think this is extraordinary because our demand for electricity continues to has started going up again, and everything we can do with efficiency to mitigate that saves homeowners a lot of money, puts less demand on the grid, and make sure that we have a stable system. And I'll just leave you with other initiatives we're doing when it comes to electricity. We've got out there, we're building wind power. It's called Revolution Wind. That's going to make a big difference. We're doing that in association with Rhode Island. That's going to turn on in less than a year. We've contracted for solar power coming down from Maine. Seems a little counterintuitive to me, solar power Maine, but apparently they've got all the open space so they can have a real commercial quality solar farm and sell that to our greater New England region. Working closely with Quebec Hydro, they're already bringing down some of that to the ISO region as well. So these are all some of the carbon-free renewable resources we're looking at. But there's nothing more important than resilience and then in the short term. And I see that Saybrook is going to be speaking as well in terms of what's going on our shoreline. But just remember, these rain bombs are hitting all over our state right now, from Naugatuck to the Connecticut River Valley, wiping out some of our farms. So it's urgent, it's real, and it's important. And that's why, Jessica, I want to thank you and Sustainable Connecticut, teaming with DEEP in our efforts and showing municipalities what they can do. I'll be listening in for a little bit to see what I can learn. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Governor. We appreciate the kind words and for you spending time with us today. So our first municipal speaker today will be Stephen Winter, who's the Executive Director of Climate and Sustainability for the Office of Climate and Sustainability for the City of New Haven. And Steve has an amazing background. I want actually to dig into your presentation, Steve, and give you more time to share out the really neat work that's happening in New Haven. But first, I need to note for the audience, New Haven was our very first gold certified town. They achieved this last year. It was our first year of offering this level of certification. They really stepped up and did some amazing work under Steve's leadership. Really remarkable. And again, with that gold level certification, they also achieved the Climate Leader. So we'll be hearing a bit about some of the work they did to achieve that designation, but also some of the work that's happening it's coming up in the city. So Steve, let me share a screen so we can see your slides here.
Thanks, Jess. And yeah, I don't want to take too much credit for it. It's really happening across city departments, across the board with local nonprofits and community groups. And a lot of it's happening with the support of the state of Connecticut, CTD, Governor Lamont, the leadership of Mayor Elicker, and also roles to play for the Green Bank as well. So it's really collaborative and all of government approach that we're trying to take and trying to learn and take leadership cues from community groups that are really leading the charge. One area where we've made a lot of improvements and have really tried to prioritize community-driven decision making, and where we have a lot of work to go, is in our Safe Streets, our Complete Streets program. And I'd like to highlight a couple elements of that. One is our Safe Routes for All plan, and then I'll give some examples of some complete streets improvements. And then the second half of my presentation will focus on a project that we should be embarking on in the next couple of months with EPA and the Green Bank around a networked geothermal system. And that was included in the state of Connecticut's Priority Climate Action Plan as part of the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. So we're really excited about that as a new model of providing affordable, clean heating and cooling to residents and businesses. So let's get started with the citywide active transportation plan, the Safe Routes for All plan. If you can go to the next slide. So the city transportation, traffic, and parking department collaborated with the Community Alliance for Research and Engagement and the Streets Plans consultant to create a citywide active transportation plan. And we're really focused on active transportation because it's essential public infrastructure. It's really healthy to have people getting out of their cars and walking, biking, rolling through New Haven, and it can promote equity in the city and affordable transportation alternatives. And the goal here was really to educate residents, engage residents about walking, biking, and transit options in the city. And we're really excited about where this is heading, both the bus rapid transit collaboration with CTDOT on some of our major bus corridors, and the bicycle and pedestrian improvements that the city is working on implementing. So some of that engagement took place through low-cost interventions that are leading the way for actual physical improvements. We're making major streetscape changes to the public right-of-way. So if you can go to the next slide, you can see these are areas that were mapped through the planning process. We had a total of more than 70 community members who joined 9 different walking and biking routes. So these are like walk audits or handlebar audits to look at the nitty-gritty on a block-to-block level about where the streets are working for folks and where they're not, where we're coming up short. These occurred on 29 different streets in 13 different neighborhoods. And we got a lot of really valuable feedback to inform this community mobility needs assessment that was happening on a citywide scale. Next slide, please. A key element of the Safe Routes for All proposal is to prioritize investments in disadvantaged communities. So as defined by Community Alliance for Research and Engagement, these are historically low income areas and communities of color, like Dixwell, New Hallville, Fairhaven, The Hill, Dwight. So you can see them mapped here with these red dots. They have enduring economic and social disparities, and we see this in health outcomes. There's a life expectancy gap between New Hallville and nearby Westville, less than a mile away, of over 12 years. So we really see this. The average person in New Hallville lives to be 72 versus 84 in nearby Westville. And part of that, unfortunately, is the traffic violence that's occurring on the streets. So if you go to the next slide, you can see, we have a Vision Zero goal. We want to eliminate traffic fatalities in the city, and we're working to get there. But this continues to be a really persistent issue for us. As of the drafting of the plan, pedestrian and bicycle fatalities made up about 2/3 of traffic fatalities since 2019. So it's a really urgent issue and one that we're really focused on. If you go to the next slide, we can give some examples of what these improvements ultimately look like. So here in one of our federally designated disadvantaged communities, Beaver Hills, we have a spot improvement. So this was submitted as part of the Climate Leader Designation under Action 6.1, where a really wide intersection was transformed into a raised crossing with highly visible markings, pedestrian islands, and bump outs to help enable pedestrians to cross more safely here. We'd had a lot of safety concerns at this intersection, and there was a really extensive community engagement process that we submitted as one of our equity toolkits to Sustainable CT. It began with meeting with the alderperson and the state representative for the area, and then there were a series of community meetings where feedback about how wide the street was, how people felt unsafe as pedestrians in the area, the lack of traffic control and the speed of vehicles all had come up. There was a back and forth with the community about what potential interventions could look like, and that's ultimately how we arrived at the design improvements here. The next slide also has a spot improvement, and that is our beloved Peanut Rotary. So the engineering team is really proud of this. Not only that it's a really ingenious intervention, but also that it was able to be done at a relatively low cost. This was a $600,000 project, and you might say, wow, that's a ton of money. But oftentimes rotaries cost in the millions of dollars. So they're really proud of that. And this is a great example of one of our high crash areas where we're having a lot of crashes. There were more than 50 crashes between 2016 and 2021. So about more than 10 a year. And it was a challenging intersection. I think there was probably some good reasons for focusing on this. And ultimately, we came up with this peanut-shaped rotary design with associated pedestrian islands and incorporating a two-way cycle track. We've done a lot of work in the last few years to expand the city's cycle track network to make it easier for folks to access downtown and other parts of the city on bicycle. So with that, I'll transition to the second half of my presentation, which is not, hopefully will be part of our next, one of our next Sustainable CT applications. So the city applied for funding through the US EPA's Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program Implementation Grant, and we were selected. So we're hoping that next month we will receive our award and begin work on this project. The idea, as I mentioned before, is a network geothermal system or a thermal energy network where a series of buildings can utilize geothermal energy and also exchange energy between buildings. If there's one building that needs to reject heat and another building that needs heat, it allows for a highly efficient transfer of energy between buildings. And so this was submitted through the CPRG program, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. If you go to the next slide, we really view this as a generational investment in clean energy in New Haven. We often think of clean energy, we think of wind and solar, but this is about the energy that's right beneath our feet, the geothermal energy that we can tap into as an affordable source of heating and cooling. This is a partnership between the city, its housing authority, and the New Haven Parking Authority. And the goal is to decarbonize our main train station, Union Station, to get it off of natural gas as its primary source of heat, and utilizing a geothermal heat pump to provide heating and cooling for not only the station, but across the street at a large development of between 1,500 and 2,500 units. So it's going to be a great transit-oriented development, a gateway to the city. So we want to reduce climate and air pollution. We want to build this shared platform for affordable neighborhood scale decarbonization. And we want to create some really high quality jobs for New Haven residents. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the project site. So the train station is the narrower of the two yellow blobs at the bottom of the map. And then the parcels across the streets are the development sites where there's a master planning process underway with HUD to create mixed income development. It'll be very transit oriented, being so close to the train station. So we're excited about, from a city planning perspective, what that means for climate and sustainability. And the thermal energy network, the network geothermal system, would serve this new development. I should have put in some of the artist renderings of what it looks like. It'll look a lot. It looks much more beautiful than this. And in the long run, we see if you go to the next slide, we can look at some modeling about how this compares to what your energy bills might be with gas or air source heat pumps. And so with some really conservative modeling, we think this will lead to much, much lower energy bills for residents in accessing geothermal heating and cooling. And then if you go to the last slide, we're really excited about the potential to expand this network in the long run to the surrounding neighborhoods. It's, again, one of our disadvantaged communities, environmental justice neighborhoods, and to bring in other buildings as anchor properties that can contribute thermal energy to the system. So we have an overhead of a chiller at the city's main police headquarters. That could be another anchor property to bring in a higher diversity of uses, which increases the efficiency of the network and lowers costs for new participants.
Thank you so much, Steve. That is so exciting to see all the projects underway in the city of New Haven. And I want to tell the audience, if you have questions, we're going to save them for the end, so you can ask them of all three of our municipal speakers. If you think you might forget them, feel free to place them in the chat. We do want to get to your questions. But next, we're going to hear from Sarah McElwicky, who is the project assistant with the town of Old Saybrook. And Sarah was instrumental in helping Old Saybrook become the, drumroll, second gold certified town in the state. So just again, so much good work that's happening out across Connecticut. In Old Saybrook, we're actually celebrating our 2024 certified towns in Old Saybrook in just 2 months at the Cape. We're looking forward to celebrating with you, Sarah. But in the meantime, let's hear about some of the resilience work that you've got going on in town.
Again, hi, I'm Sarah McElwicky, a project assistant in the Old Saybrook Land Use Department. The biggest, most time-consuming, and ultimately rewarding project that I've worked on over the past year and a half is the town's Sustainable Connecticut submission. For Old Saybrook, coastal resiliency is a high on the priority list. It has to be when town boasts 23 linear miles of shoreline, with 6 miles abutting Long Island Sound and 17 miles on the Connecticut River, with another 5.2 square miles of cove embayment. That's a lot of shoreline to think about when dealing with floods, hurricanes, tropical storms, and even just a heavy rainfall and there is water over the road. Parts of town flood on a regular basis, with beach communities experiencing the most inundation. So when talk turns to sea level rise, we have to be ahead of the game. The town of Old Saybrook has done this in a couple of ways. One is our flood ordinance. Old Saybrook currently has 6 different designations for flood zones. In 2021, the Board of Selectmen approved an amendment to the town flood ordinance to expand its standards beyond the requirements of FEMA. The most substantial of those expansions was requiring 2 feet of freeboard to the base flood elevation. If you don't deal with flood zones on a regular basis, you must be thinking, what the heck is she talking about? The simple explanation is each flood zone has a base level elevation, which is a number. It represents how many feet is above the mean sea level. If FEMA requires 11 feet, Old Saybrook will require 13. If the house is under that 13 feet, in some cases, the house will have to be raised to obtain 13 feet of mean sea level rise. So in what cases do you have to raise a house? Do you want to add a second story? You have to get past zoning first, but then you have to do some math. The homeowner has half of the appraised value of the structure to do that renovation, minus any work that has been done over the past 10 years. If you want that $250,000 renovation, you will probably have to raise your house. But if it's just a small bedroom renovation, then you can accomplish that within a substantial improvement standard. You're good to go. Pending building permits, of course. Old Saybrook does this so that when FEMA adjusts the flood maps, half of the town will not have to raise their structures. Property owners will be able to stay compliant to FEMA standards for longer, making the town resilient to future flooding events. We take our flood regulations seriously and actively enforce regulations on non-compliant structures. So tell your friends, you will not get away with anything in Old Saybrook. But because it is of this expansion of regulations beyond the FEMA standards, we were able to use our flood ordinance to fulfill and implement your own sustainability action. Something that I did not catch in our initial submission in the fall of 2023. But do you know who did catch it? The Sustainable Connecticut team. They encouraged me to add the action to the application. That small addition is what put Old Saybrook over the required points to gain climate leader status and ultimately gold level. So here is my first tip. Use the Sustainable Connecticut team. They are an amazing resource and pushed me over the line to gain gold status and tapped into my competitiveness to receive the highest points total. Sorry, New Haven. So what plans and actions are happening to keep Old Saybrook ahead of the curve when it comes to coastal resiliency? This year, we finished revising our natural hazard and mitigation plan that will complement the 2023-2033 POCD, where actionable items are laid out to obtain goals. Also, Old Saybrook has joined the Borough of Fenwick, Westbrook, and Clinton to establish a regional coastal resiliency plan. Because when a storm hits, it's not just the borders of one town that are affected. If destruction happens in Clinton, how will that affect the shorelines of Westbrook and Old Saybrook, and vice versa? Through the Long Island Sound Futures Fund grant from National Wildlife Foundation, a plan is just now being finalized for actionable projects that the 3 towns in one borough can work on together to secure our coastline into the future. With Sustainable Connecticut in mind, all outreach for the Foreshore Resiliency Project were done with equity in mind. Surveys were distributed in an equitable way by providing paper copies to those who cannot access the project website. Community outreach events were held in each town for residents to ask questions, point out where they have experienced flooding, and give feedback directly to those writing the plan. Also, a website was established with an interactive map of areas that regularly flood and a tell us your experience section. The community really took an interest in the projects, showing a great turnout for all the town's community events and participating on the interactive website. Old Saybrook used the outreach from the Foreshore Resiliency Project to fulfill an action. Action 5.1.1C, ongoing outreach was achieved by a trickle-down effect. The town adapted the 2023-2033 POCD. An actual item in the POCD was to research coastal resiliency. The Foreshores Project fulfilled those criteria, and the outreach done for this project fulfilled that action of 5.1.1C. Simple. But this shows how you need to make connections between projects or plans that will help to fulfill actions and get you those points. My advice to other towns, again, use the resources Sustainable Connecticut has to offer. You don't always have to go big. You don't always have to come up with some huge project to fulfill an action. Sometimes it's the things a town does on a daily basis that will get you the points. If you're not sure, run it by the team. I always say it's like throwing spaghetti up against the wall. Eventually, the team will tell you you're on the right track. And my number one tip is to stay organized. Spreadsheets are your best friend. Thank you to the Sustainable Connecticut team for having me speak today. And I hope to see everyone at the Kate and Old Saybrook for the 2024 Sustainable Connecticut Awards. Thanks, Jess.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was great. Okay, so we are moving right along. Remember, put those questions in the chat. Our final municipal speaker today will be Chris Till, who's the facilities manager for the town of Manchester. Say that 10 times fast. So Chris is going to talk to us about some amazing work that's happening with regard to building some net zero schools. I am super excited to hear more about that. I want to let you know that the town of Manchester earned our silver certification in 2022, and they got the Climate Leader Designation just last year. So continuing to do that great work in Manchester. Chris, I'm going to share a screen so we can get to your slides. And here we are.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning. I'm pleased to represent Manchester, recognized climate leader by Sustainable Connecticut, and provide some highlights of our recent net zero energy projects for this Sustainability and Resiliency Week celebration. Next slide. Let me first begin by acknowledging all of the work and commitment to our sustainability project, which begins with our elected body, the Manchester Board of Directors, who've provided the support to make net zero energy a reality in Manchester. These projects owe much of their success to the Manchester Building Committee, volunteers who have overseen the design and construction of these projects, ensuring that the project goals are met while maintaining schedule and project budget. The Manchester Sustainability Committee provided the vision and advocacy for net zero energy to the Manchester Board of Directors and challenged the town leadership to make sustainable construction more than a lofty goal, but an achievable reality. And most importantly, our design team, led by Principal Architect Randall Luther of TSKP Studio and nationally recognized CMTA Engineering. Next slide. Manchester has completed 3 net zero energy K-4 elementary school renovations, which started with Buckley Elementary School that opened in September 22, as Governor Lamont recognized. Buckley Elementary is the first verified net zero energy public school in New England, followed by Bowers Elementary and Keeney, which just opened a few weeks ago. Manchester's applied this knowledge gained from these net zero energy school projects to the design of a new Manchester Public Library, which we are just completing the final design. Here are the few objectives I'd like to cover in the next minutes of my presentation. First, I'd like to discuss how to incorporate net zero energy strategies into a modern educational program, into a 1950s vintage elementary school retrofit. Renovating existing buildings can reduce embodied carbon emissions by 50 to 75% compared to building new schools. Next, I'd like to review and integrate the owner's overall sustainability mission into a successful project. There's no doubt that a net zero energy and electrification are absolutely central to shift away from fossil fuels using decarbonization strategies. There's much more that I could talk about, but given the limited time, I'd invite those who'd like to learn more to Eversource's 2024 Net Zero Energy Conference on October 16th, where we'll talk more in detail about our projects. Next slide. So can a Ford Pinto be transformed into a Tesla? So town staff and building committee, we were skeptical about feasibility of transforming these older schools built in the 50s into state-of-the-art 21st century learning environments with the latest technology. But Manchester became more optimistic during the interview process for the design team when the engineers showed us that they've successfully done this across the country. Next slide. So our goals for these renovations were to create a 21st century learning environment, adding additional key program space, creating renovate like new according to the state department, which grants department, achieving net zero by driving down the energy use intensity below 25, which required very tight building envelope, focusing on indoor air quality, natural daylighting, and of course, 100% building electrification. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of the breakout area in Buckley Elementary School, which transformed the old tired floor plan, which by creating a vertical connection between the floors and creating an alternative learning environment for smaller groups of students. Next slide. New Building Institute defines a net zero energy school as an extremely energy efficient building that is designed and operated to produce as much energy as it consumes over the course of the year. Next slide. Achieving net zero energy requires minimizing energy consumption to an EUI target of about 20 and providing renewable solar PV panels in order to meet the annual energy consumption. Next slide. The shift to zero energy buildings is an incremental process that requires professionals to work together to improve building and energy performance. The ASHRAE Advanced Energy Design Guide for K-12 schools provides a step-by-step guide. Next slide. The process for net zero includes both passive and active strategies. Geothermal, solar PV panels, 100% electrification of equipment, kitchen equipment, an ultra-tight building envelope, demand control ventilation with energy recovery, and a data-driven design using energy modeling and best construction practices. Next slide. So the key to net zero, achieving net zero, is a tight building envelope that includes insulation, air vapor barriers to reduce infiltration, and of course, minimize energy use. Next slide. In order to achieve a tight building envelope, we use a process of blower door pressure testing and thermal imaging cameras to ensure that the building is performing at its highest potential. Next slide. So this is a indication of how we were able to drive down the air infiltration at the Buckley Elementary School in order to help us to achieve net zero energy. Next slide. Follow the energy. We achieve net zero by following a drastic energy reduction approach for these older buildings. The key strategy is to significantly minimize building energy consumption through highly efficient design elements and practices, looking at all of the different categories of energy use within the building. Next slide. So most importantly is the HVAC. Heat pump systems are crucial for net zero energy building design. Air source heat pumps extracts heat from the air, while water source heat pumps draw the heat from geothermal wells. Water source are generally more energy efficient because the temperature of the water in the ground is more stable than the air temperature, leading to better performance, especially in extreme weather conditions. Next slide. So here's a schematic and some photos showing how geothermal heat pumps work, as well as the equipment that we had installed in the mechanical room. Next slide. And here's some additional photos showing heat pumps, the piping, the pumps for the equipment to heat and cool the space within the building. Next slide. So we achieve net zero by creating our electricity on site using solar PV panels. Here's a picture showing the solar array mounted on the roof, as well as what was predicted in the energy model to ensure that we met our target energy requirements for the project. Next slide. So I mentioned EUI of 20 was our target. Well, after we collected a year's worth of data, we found that we're actually achieving better than our target EUI 17.3. So we used roughly 334,000 kilowatt hours and produced almost 409,000 kilowatt hours. So as a whole, we achieved net zero, and we're certified by the New Building Institute as a net zero energy building. Next slide. And here's a graphical representation showing over the course of the year how the actual building performed compared to the predicted. We have the PV production as well as the consumption from the building itself. Next slide. Once again, CMTA has been a fantastic partner for Manchester in the design of these schools and tracking the energy consumption, making sure that we meet our targets as designed, and being able to verify that the building's performing according to the design. Next slide. So how do we pay for this? Well, we work with the partners at Eversource to maximize incentives through their Path 1 program, working with the utility early in the process. And for Buckley, we received roughly $267,000 in incentives. This is before the implementation of the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act incentives for geothermal. So Manchester made a commitment to net zero even before those greater incentives were available. Next slide. Which we took advantage of. Bowers was the first school eligible for Inflation Reduction Act, and we have an estimated $2.3 million that we're expecting to get back for that school. In Keeney, as I mentioned, we just finished, and we're projecting between $2.5 and $3 million. So these incentives help offset all of the additional costs associated with net zero energy design. Next slide. And so here's to finish up the presentation, some before and after, basically transforming this building into essentially a new school, letting in lots of natural light and creating some additional curb appeal. Next slide. Here's a view straight on from the front. As you can see on the right-hand side, we installed a solar smart flower, which really provides a focal point for this design for students, for residents, to recognize the school as a unique building, as a net zero energy design school that's fully powered based on renewable resources. Next slide. And here's a really dramatic before and after photos taken from the same location within the school, showing how the architect was able to build in the clear story to let in a lot of natural light, opening up the wall to be able to look down into the gymnasium and really create a bright and open and inviting space for students in Manchester. Next slide. And here's another one of those vertical connections that the architect was able to make between the upper and the lower floor, using lots of color. On the left-hand side, we have the energy dashboard, which is a learning tool really to demonstrate to students and staff and visitors how the solar is producing, how much energy the building's using, in order to really highlight all of the investments and sustainable infrastructure that we put in this Buckley Elementary School. Next slide. And as I stated, Buckley is the New England's first verified net zero energy public school, and by the New Building Institute, and we're very proud of that. And there's been a lot of people who've been involved and helped to make that a success, and I'm just happy to be part of the team. Thank you.
Chris, thank you. Those schools are beautiful. What a resource for students and families in Manchester. All right, so thanks to our three speakers and to the governor, we do have about 5 minutes for questions. So let's just see. All right, we've got one question in the chat, which, feel free to put in a couple more. So this is from David Oakes, who was the design engineer firm for Buckley, and he commends you on your impressive project.
So the architects were TSKP Studio, and CMTA engineers did all of the design of the systems for the school.
Thanks, Chris. Other questions folks want to put in the chat? Well, I'm going to ask one of Steve while we wait. Steve, the train station is going to get a little love pretty soon with the CPRG funds. What sort of retrofits are you going to be doing to the train station? Is it going to look a little bit different like we saw the before and after with Buckley? Are you envisioning some big changes there?
The short answer is yes. The city and the parking authority who manages the train station are going to be doing some larger changes to the building itself, and looking to increase the number of uses for the station, bringing in more local businesses. Our project's mainly focused on the HVAC system, but I'm hopeful that we can work together, because I think they're definitely complementary.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to ask another question while we wait for people to use the chat. Oh, Diane put one in. Can all of the speakers comment on whether OPM school construction reimbursement policies for school buildings discourage or encourage retrofits versus new construction? Not sure. Chris, maybe you want to start us
Sure.
off on that
I'll
one.
take that. And when we came in for our first net zero project The director was very enthusiastic, very excited, and frankly, he stated that he felt that all Connecticut school renovation construction projects should target net zero energy. So they've been a great partner in our projects.
Sarah and Steve, would you like to comment on your experience?
We're not as far down the path as Chris is. We want to get there, though. It's awesome to see the work that Manchester's team has done. I think
Agree. It's
one.
a
Oh, go
beautiful
ahead.
building.
One thing Chris and I have been touched about, and it'd be good to if you can comment, Chris, is like how the reimbursement program at the state level and the federal incentives
Yeah, that's great question. We were concerned about being penalized from the federal and utility incentives, and we're able to get some language on the latest implementer bill that allows us to retain the incentives that we've gotten from both the Inflation Reduction Act as well as the utility incentives, so that we're not having the grant reduced one for one by these other incentives. And this really helps to offset some of the premium costs associated with the net zero.
So if you have like a state school construction reimbursement, an UI incentive, and a federal incentive, you're not reducing one in order to claim another?
That's true for Manchester, yes.
Excellent. We've got a question for you, Steve. Steve, can you please explain a little more about how the networked element of the geothermal system works using wells as well as taking or rejecting energy from existing buildings' HVAC systems? Seasonally, it seems like adding more buildings, the balance might be upset.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So there's a series of boreholes that are connected by lateral pipes, and then each building has inlets and outlets to connect to the network. And yeah, I think it really depends on that building's orientation and its HVAC systems. There may be parts of the building that are warmer or colder throughout the year. So generally, the more diversity of uses on a network, the greater opportunities there are for beneficial heat exchange. So if you have a train station and a police station and businesses and housing, they have different patterns of use that can complement one another and increase the efficiency of the system. So, an air source heat pump might be 200 to 300% efficient. A ground source heat pump might be 500 to 600, and networks could be, 800 to 1200% efficient. So there's really amazing opportunities to put in 1 kilowatt hour of energy and then get many multiples of heating and cooling out of it.
We've got one more question in the chat. So if we may go 1 minute over, this is for you, Chris. For Manchester, is there still a possibility for the school to expand energy creation by, oh, I lost my question. David, you added one too. So is there a possibility for the school to expand energy creation by including or adding a carport and ground-mounted solar?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we were really fortunate in our design to be able to achieve 100% of the PV requirements from rooftop mounted units. So currently we don't have any plans to add carports or other ground mounted PV to these schools, since we're able to achieve 100% of our demands for the school.
Excellent. Thank you. And I want to thank all the speakers and the governor again for spending your mornings with us and sharing your wisdom. This has been very informative and interesting and inspirational. We have a lot of work to do. We always say that, but there's a lot of work that's happening in our state, in these towns. So let's keep it up. Let's keep moving forward. We will be sharing a recording of today's presentation along with the slide deck. And if anyone has questions you want to touch base with one of the speakers afterwards, connect with me and we will be happy to make some introductions. So thank you all for being with us this morning. Thank you to our speakers and to everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day.